Good afternoon and welcome to Cymraeg for session 3 of Welsh Second Language. This afternoon session will be run once again by Miss Childs from Mountain Ash Comprehensive School. The session will last approximately 45 minutes where Miss Childs will go through the relevant subject content. If you have any questions, please use the question and answer section and we'll endeavour to answer your questions during the session. This session will be recorded and the recording and any resources will be uploaded to the e-sgol website in the Cymraeg area. So diolch yn fawr, Miss Charles, over to you.
Okay, diolch. Prynawn da pawb, and thank you for coming to the Welsh Second Language session today. So today we are going to go over the conditional tense in order to give advice to young people, because a lot of the time now in the exam they are asking you to give advice about maybe people's problems or based on people's eating habits. So hopefully revising these patterns will be useful today. We are going to revise some useful phrases like gyllech, you could, to again strengthen the advice that we are giving to people on a range of topics. Then finally, you're going to have a go yourself at answering a past paper question about problems in the environment where you could give advice to people in the exam. And finally, we're going to revise how to form questions, because a lot in the reading and the writing exam, the examiners do expect you to ask questions about people's advice. It'll also be useful to the speaking as well. So remember, you'll have communication marks if you are asking each other questions in your groups of 3 or pairs. So your chance now, I would like you to write down any conditional tense patterns. So can you type in the chat any conditional tense patterns in the chat? So for example, I would like, I should, I could. So type in the chat. Any conditional tense patterns. Okay, gwych, I can see hoffni in the chat, so I am, which means I would like. I can also see baswn I would, gallwn I could. Diane, these are brilliant, I'll ddechog, okay? So one form of the past tense that we're going over today is dill patterns, okay? These mean should, so dylan is I should, dyleti is you should, which is the singular. So if you're talking to one person, we would use dyleti. If we're talking to a group of people, we would use dylech, which is down here. Dylai is he would, dylai he is she would, dylai Bill is Bill should, dylani we should, dylech you should, and dylani they should. The easiest way to remember these are memorizing the endings and then adding dill. So you could think of maybe Dylan and you add dill and add on the endings. You could apply these patterns to the Saints Go Marching In. So dylani, dyleti, dylai, and so forth. If you want to change these to the negative, all you need to do is add them and mutate the first letter to a double D. So instead of dylani, I should, if you want to change that to I shouldn't, you would change a D to a double D. So dylani and then add on them. So dylani them for I shouldn't. If you wanted to change this to you shouldn't, you would say dylan, dyleti, them. So you're adding a double D to the beginning and adding them. One thing that we also need to remember, following these patterns, because there's no N in the conditional tense, it would cause a mutation. So instead of saying dylani voita a boita, I should eat, it would be dylani voita. Okay, so your task now, I want you to put the correct conditional tense pattern in the sentence. So fill in the gaps. So you need to be creating a conditional tense pattern. So you have the ending I, have a look in the list, or you might want to challenge yourself by not looking at the list and put the correct dill pattern in the sentence. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Okay, so the first one, you have something I, something E, boita salad by Bob Dydd. Have a look in the list, which one ends with I, and copy it down. Then we have the second one, something a Bindi Park. So you need to look for A in the list and copy down the pattern. Then you have something Bill, Bindi Gampfa and a nos. So Gampfa is the gym in the evening. So Bill should go to the gym. So which pattern would be Bill should? Then we have we should talk about the problem. So you need to look for we should in the text. Then you have new. So you need to look for which pattern has new in it and which pattern we need to put in. Then Godi Arian. So that is raising money. So think of raising money for a charity. So remember, type in the text if you need any help with anything. So if we say dive in here 2 more minutes, and remember the reasons why these are in different colours is because you need to show off the patterns to the examiner. So you're not just using these patterns in giving advice to a reading task. You could use these patterns in extended writing as well. So you need to show off your patterns to the examiner in your speaking and extended writing to gain the higher marks. Okay, if you are finishing, you could also create your own sentences in the conditional tense. Okay, if we say infinite now, 1 more minute. Remember, type in the chat if you have any questions. And if you have a look here, I did mention that there's a mutation as well after these patterns. So if you have a look after every single one of these, there's no ends. So that means some of the words have mutated. So instead of biter is viter, mind changes to vind, and codi changes to godi, and camper changes to gamper. Okay, you may be able to recycle some of these sentences in a few minutes in order to give some advice to people in our reading tasks. Okay, so remember you can type in your results in the chat if you need to. So the first one would be Dylan ni fwyta salad bob dydd. So I should eat salad every day. Dylai e fynd i park. He should go to the park. Dylai Bill fynd i gampfa yn y nos. Bill should go to the gym in the night. Dylan ni siarad am y problemau. We should talk about the problems. And dylan nhw godi arian. So they should raise money. So type in the chat any answers. Alfechog, I can see some people have achieved pimp master pimp, 5 out of 5. You may see some of these patterns also in instructions in the exam. So in the extended writing, it could say dyla ti. You should include maybe some of the bullet points in the writing question. So if you ever get any of these patterns in the exam, you could flick through some of the questions and the answers could be in there somewhere. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Rhoi Cynga, giving advice. So coming up in your Unit 3 and 4 papers, the exam board could ask you to give advice about a certain topic. So it could be giving advice about someone's diet, maybe asking you to identify problems in maybe school, and giving you and you'd have to ask advice about giving how to solve the problems. Okay. So here's some useful phrases. This is directly from the exam marking scheme of what the exam board has suggested that you could use in your responses. So paid means don't. Dylachi, which we've gone over, is you should plural or formal. So remember, years ago, we used to show respect to people in authority, or if you didn't know someone that well, we would use he. If you're talking in an informal situation, writing an informal letter or maybe a blog, you would use ti. Galchachi is you could. Raidachi is you must. Dylati is you should. Plural, singular, sorry. And raidati is you must, singular. As I mentioned already, you could see some of these words in the instructions in the exam as well. So when it comes to extended writing, if it says dylachi, you should write about in something, you have to include the bullet points in your answers. If it says galachi, it means that you can, they do recommend you using some of the bullet points, but you can also add in some extra information about yourself as well. Okay, so these are really useful phrases that you could start learning for your exam. Okay, so your task now, you need to cyfieithwch, translate y brawddegau I Saesneg. So you need to translate these sentences into English. We literally just went through some of these phrases. I've also given you some of these here. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to translate some of these phrases into English. Remember, type in the chat if you need any help with anything or any words. Okay, so the first one, dyla ti, we've gone over before. Bwyta salad. So bwyta, oops, bwyta. Salad, very similar to English. Then the second one, dyla chi, again, that is plural or formal. Weithio. Weithio is here to work, and a shop. What does shop sound like in English? Okay, we've just had a question through, and it's asking beth ydi ysmygu yn Saesneg. What is smoking in English? What is ysmygu in English? And ysmygu, you may see on the street signs in public places, because they'll always say peidiwch ar ysmygu, don't smoke. So ysmygu is to smoke. Rhoi ti, again, is informal. We just went through that. Then siarad Cymraeg, siarad Ffrangeg, siarad Cymraeg. Then gydag, athrawon. Athrawon, if you have a look at the list, are teachers. And the reason it changes from gyda to gydag is because the next word begins with a vowel, so that's why we use gydag there. Okay, if we say 2 minutes, 2 more minutes. Okay, then the next one, gallech chi, which we just went over. Cerdded is to walk here, to walk. Then i'r cinema, what does cinema sound like in English? Then finally, you have rhaid i chi, which again is furfiol, formal, stopio, and then ysmygu. Someone asked in the chat what's ysmygu, and it means to smoke. So stopio sounds very similar to English as well. Okay, 1 minute now, 1 more minute. And remember, if you do finish, you can ysgrifennu eich hun brawddegau. You can create your own sentences using some of the phrases. So hopefully we may be able to recycle some of these sentences or patterns to answer a reading task in a few minutes. And remember, these are all in different colours because you need to show off your patterns to the examiner. Remember, type in the chat if you have any questions. Okay, so a few more seconds now. Okay, if we go dros the atebion. Okay, so dyla ti bwyta salad. Remember, you can put your answers in the text if you need to. So ticioch, give yourself a tick at home. You should eat salad. And remember, that's singular because it's ti and you're talking to one person. So ti is informal. Dyla chi weithio yn y shop. You should work in the shop. and again, that's rhywosog plural. So if you're talking to a group of people, or if you're in a formal situation like an interview or formal letter, and you want to show respect to someone, we would use dyle chi. You could see some of these phrases in the extended 20-mark or 25-mark questions, just above the bullet points. Rhaid i ti siarad Cymraeg gyda athrawon. You must speak Welsh with teachers. So if you had a problem about maybe school uniform or something like that, you could encourage people to talk with teachers or speak with teachers. Gallech chi gerdded i'r cinema. You could walk to the cinema. So if the problem is maybe affording to go to the cinema, or maybe you want to keep fit and healthy, you could encourage people to exercise. Rhaid i chi stopio smygu. You must stop smoking. And again, that's plural. Chi, talking to a group of people instead of singular. So type in the chat the amount of marks that you have achieved. Okay, gwych, I can see some people cyflwyni 5 mas o 5, achieving 5 out of 5. Ardderchog, that's brilliant, Zion. So keep up this brilliant work. Okay, so now we are now going to look at a task darllen, a reading task which could come up in the exam. So this question is literally out of 4 marks, okay? I want you now to read the question for 2 minutes, 2 minutes, and can you think of any patterns or type in any patterns in the chat that you could use to answer this question? So 2 minutes. So the question says, Rhoi cyngor i'r ysgol, give advice to the school or city wella problem. Give advice to the school on how to improve the problem. Okay, so you would be expected to give advice about the problem, and if you have a look in the photos, there's some spurial and flow, some rubbish on the floor, biniau, some overflowing bins. Okay, gwych, I can see someone has typed in the chat that you could write down dyle ti, you should. Someone else has written in gallech ti, you could. Okay, Diane, I can see that you're remembering some of the patterns that we have gone over. Gwych. Okay, 1 munud, 1 more minute. Then the second question says, sut rydych chi'n? That means how can you help me gofalu am y planet? So how can you look after or help care for the planet? So that's talking about you. So what patterns could we type in or write down if you're talking about I need to do something? I can see in the chat that we have typed in the phrase rydw I. Okay, that means exactly the same as dwi'n. So remember, dwi'n is just a shortened version. It is better to use rydw though, because it's more used in written Welsh instead of spoken Welsh. Okay, so it's brilliant so far that we can have come up with a variety of patterns which we can use in order to answer this reading task. Okay, so da iawn, ardderchog. So if we summed ymlaen now, move on to the next task. So your task is to ateb the question, answer the question. Okay, so I'm going to give you around about 3 minutes in order to answer this question. So it says at the top, my spurial and problem yn yr ysgol. So as you've gathered from the pictures, spurial is rubbish. So rubbish is a problem in school, and you need to answer these questions for 4 marks, okay? So the first one, it says Rhoi cyngor. That's a really useful phrase you need to learn. So give advice i'r ysgol am sut I wella y problem. So give advice on how to help the problem. And if you have a look in the marking criteria, it gives 1 plus a tick. That means you need to give a full sentence, and you also need to spell correctly. So if you only wrote, I don't know, bin or algalchi, it's not a full answer. It's not a full sentence, so we can't give you the full marks. Okay. So what they're looking for is the useful phrases that we've gone over to gain 1 mark, and if the advice makes sense in a full sentence and is spelled correctly, then we can give you the full marks, okay? So for example, you could say, dylech chi, you should. If there's lots of rubbish on the floor, what could we buy? What type of bins could we use? As long as the right advice makes sense, is in a full sentence, is spelled correctly, then you can gain the 2 full marks. Then if we move on to the second one, it says, sut rydych chi'n helpu gofalu am y blaned? And if you notice, at the moment, they have translated the sentences or the questions into English. How do you help care for the planet? Again, this needs to be in a full sentence. It also needs to be make sense and spelled correctly in order to gain the 2 marks. So you could say, Rydw, I am. So what are you doing to care for the planet? So you could say, I walk to school. I am recycling. I am going to the eco club. Or you could say what you are not doing. So I am not throwing rubbish. I am not going in a car to school. Okay, and again, it needs to be in a full sentence. This example of a past paper has been very nice because they have translated the questions into English. There's nothing stopping the examiner from just giving Welsh only questions for these. So I would start learning key question words, which we've gone over in previous lessons, like sit, how, rhoi cyngor, give advice. Okay, so if we say un funud now, 1 more minute. And here are a few phrases that you could use. Is nothing stopping you from using one of the other phrases that we covered. So dylech chi, you could. Gallech chi, you could plural. Dylech chi, sorry, is you should. Rhaid chi, you must. Then here you could say something positive, something negative. Make sure it's in a full sentence. Make sure it's spelled correctly. Remember, after these 3 phrases here, there would be a soft mutation. But the main thing to remember for this question, it needs to be in a brow there clown, in a full sentence. You need the phrases here, which we've gone over, and the advice or what you do to save the planet needs to make sense. Okay, a few more seconds now. And they could get you to do this on any topic. They could ask you about how to solve school problems, maybe about your diet. Someone has a problem with maybe smoking. What advice could you give them? And this could come up in either paper. Okay, if we mynd dros yr atebion, so here are some examples. You may have come up with different ones. You're more than welcome to share any answers in the chat. So dylech chi gael mwy o finiau. You should have more bins. Gallech chi defnyddio biniau ailgylchu. You could recycle, use recycle bins. Someone wrote in the chat, dylech ti ailgylchu. That's brilliant. You should recycle. Okay, so it just needs to make sure you have used the beginning of the phrase here, use the full sentence, it's spelled correctly to gain you full marks. If you notice here, I've also used the mutation. Then the second question, if you notice, they use a lot of formal Welsh in the question. So they've said, rydych chi'n, that means exactly the same as oed ti'n. It means, how do you? The exam boards are more and more using more formal language, so don't let it throw you. Just be aware they could come up with that. So I've said, rydw i'n prynu bwyd lleol, so I buy local food. Dydw I ddim yn gwastraffu trydan. I don't waste electric. Someone's written in the chat, rydw i'n cerdded e-sgol, I walk to school. Da iawn. Or someone's written in, rydw i'n ailgylchu. One final thing that you need to watch out for, you need to make sure the answers are relevant to the pattern. So if you said, for example, here for the second one, rydw i'n bwyta salad, it makes sense that you're saying that you are doing something, but it's not really related to saving the planet. Just because you're eating salad, it doesn't mean that you're saving the planet. If you said, rydw i'n bwyta bwyd lleol, bwydydd lleol, I'm eating local food, or rydw i'n bwyta bwydydd organic, maybe, organic food, they could possibly give you the answer, but you need to make sure it does link to the question as well. Okay, so type in your atebion and a chat, so write in your answers in the chat. Okay, gwych, I can see 1 or 2 people have achieved pedwar mas o pedwar, 4 out of 4. Gwych. So, now we're going to symud ymlaen now to gofyn eich cwestiynau. Okay, so gofyn eich cwestiynau are asking questions. So, in your speaking, you need to ask questions to other people. If you do not ask questions, we cannot give you communication marks, which means your speaking marks will go down. And you could be asked to ask questions in your reading and writing. So they might give you a statement or a piece of text, and you might have to ask questions about the text. So for example, they might give you a text about Llangrannog, and they might ask you to ask questions about the staff, about maybe the activities in Llangrannog, or it could be about a sporting event and ask information. They might give you a profile about someone's life, and they might ask you to form questions about their life. So here are some useful phrases that you might want to start revising in order to form questions. So I always think back to year 7, what's the key questions that you learned? So you could say, wyt ti'n hoffi something? Do you like something? So if the question was about maybe sports, and he was asking a famous person their opinion about sports, you could say, wyt ti'n hoffi, I don't know, pêl-droed. Oes something gyda ti. So oes brawd gyda ti. Oes maes park gyda ti. Do you have a car park? Fydd will something be. So fydd chocolate in the cinema. Will there be chocolate in the cinema? Pryd mae film. When is the film? Ble mae something. Where is something? Ble mae cinema. Where's the cinema? Ble mae Llangrannog. Where's Llangrannog? What is your opinion about something? Beth ydy dy farn di ar? What is your opinion on? You can change it to am if this is about. That's a really useful pattern you could also ask in your speaking as well. Oes syniad arall gyda ti? Do you have any other ideas? That's a really useful word that you could do in your speaking as well. Faint mae, how much is? Faint mae tocynau, how much are the tickets? Beth wyt ti'n meddwl am? You could also say beth wyt ti'n feddwl am. What do you think about? And you could add in something related to the question. So you need to also make sure the questions are relevant to the question. Okay, there are a lot more questions that you could use, but these are some useful ones that you could ask. So they might ask you to write 3 questions. They need to make sense in the exam. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 munud now. I want you to type in any questions that question words that you could use in order to answer this question here. So in the pictures, there's someone on a ffôn symudol or defnyddio ffôn symudol, a mobile phone, and then you have some lluniau, pictures of some gwefannau cymdeithasol, so some useful API or apps or useful social media websites. So you have a bit of Twitter, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube. So your task is to gofyn a question. So ask a question about using social media. So someone's typed in the chat now, wyt ti'n defnyddio? Do you use something? Someone else has typed in, sut wyt ti'n? How do you? Brilliant, Saya. And then it goes on to saying, pa wefannau ydych chi'n defnyddio? Which websites do you use? So how could you try and answer that question? Gwych, I can see someone has typed in the chat, rydw i'n defnyddio. That means I use, and you could say which social media sites that you do use. Okay, gwych, Diane. Okay, so now we're going to symud ymlaen and I want you to atebwch a question. I want you to answer the questions, okay? Some people type some useful phrases in the chat that you could use. So I want you now to ateb y question yn Gymraeg. So it says here, it's giving you a statement. Mae Rob yn defnyddio gwefannau cymdeithasol bob dydd. So that means Rob uses websites, social websites every day. And you need to gofyn eich question, iddo am defnyddio gwefannau cymdeithasol. So you need to ask him a question about using social media, okay? And if we go back, this is for 1 mark, so it needs to be in a full answer, full question, and it needs to make sense. So here are some questions that you could use. You could think of your own. Beth wyt ti'n meddwl am? What do you think about? The good thing about social media is brands don't tend to translate in Welsh. They have come up with some words for Twitter and Facebook in Welsh. The treasure is Twitter, but most of the time brands don't translate into Welsh. So you could just say YouTube. You could just say TikTok. So as long as the question makes sense, then they would not penalise you or take any marks off you. So if we say 3 minutes now, 3 minutes to try and answer this question. Okay, so I've also put in another useful one. Beth ydy dy barn di ar? What is your opinion on? And then you could finish the question. Remember your question marks as well. If you're struggling in the exam, there's a lot of question words in the exam, so flick through and recycle any questions. And again, it's nothing stopping them from taking out the English. They could just say, gofyn a question am y testyn, ask a question about the text. If you wrote down something like, beth wyt ti'n meddwl am e-sgol? What do you think about school? Even though the question makes sense, they would take the mark off you because you're not asking a question about the social website. So remember, social network websites or social media. So remember, the question has to be relevant to the theme that the question is talking about as well. Okay, so if we move on to the next question, pa wefannau. So pa is which. Then we have the formal phrase again, ydych chi'n. So remember, ydych chi'n is the same as wyt ti'n. It means do you. And a useful word to use in exam is defnyddio. So which websites do you use? Again, it doesn't have to be true. No one's going to check if you actually use Google or if you use BBC Bitesize. As long as the question makes sense or the answer makes sense, you'll get your marks. And it says about their clown again. So remember, 1 plus tick means it needs to be in a full sentence, it needs to be spelled correctly, and it needs to make sense. And again, you need to be careful about making sure that the statement or the answer is relevant to the question. Okay, if we say dive in it now, 2 more minutes. Okay, so here are some ideas which you could use in your answer. So useful phrases. Rydw i'n defnyddio, I am using or I use. And remember, brands don't translate, so technology is a really useful or easy topic because a lot of the brands aren't translated into Welsh. So you could say, I use TikTok. I use Instagram. You could say what you like, rydw i'n hoffi something. Or rydw i'n mynd ar, I go on something. If you said something like, dydw i ddim yn hoffi, I don't like, it's not saying that you don't use, it's not saying that you're using something, so they couldn't give you the mark. Okay, if we say un funud now, 1 more minute. A really useful phrase to learn as well is defnyddio. So if you add an L to this word here, it means useful. So you could say some rydw i'n hoffi Twitter achos mae Twitter yn defnyddiol, because Twitter is useful. Okay, and this is a 3-mark question. So every mark is vital in the exam. And if you didn't ask a question, or you left it blank, or if the question didn't make sense, then you'd lose your marks. Okay, if we say un fydd yna, 1 more minute. So I would learn the phrase gofyn eich gwestiwn, ask a question. And remember, you could recycle some of these questions before you speak in. The more you communicate with each other, the higher your marks will be. And remember, be careful in your speaking as well. If the topic is talking about school, your questions need to be relevant to the school subjects. If you started talking about maybe the environment, but you didn't link it to school, so if you didn't talk about Eco Club, or you just asked the question about the environment randomly, you would lose marks there. So you need to make sure you bring it back to the exam question that you are discussing. Okay, they may also give you, if you're doing a Unit 2 speaking this year, which is talk about statements, they might have a question on the statement that you could ask each other, or it could be a graph, and people's asked answer the question about a graph or a chart, and you could ask each other the question from the exam sheet as well. Okay, just a few more seconds. Remember, type in the chat if you have any questions. Okay, so if we go dros the atebion, so remember, type in the chat if you have written any questions. So here are just a few examples of what you could have written down. So remember, the first one was gofyn a question, asking a question iddo am defnyddio gwefannau cymdeithasol. So asking a question about using social media. So I wrote down, beth wyt ti'n meddwl am TikTok? Nice and easy. What do you think about TikTok? And again, I've kept it relevant about the question. So I didn't say beth wyt ti'n meddwl am Stormzy. What do you think about Stormzy? Because even though Stormzy has a social media website, it's not really related to the topic. The other one I've said, beth ydy dyfandi a siarad gyda Skype? What do you think about speaking on Skype? So I think some of the lockdowns have been really useful to us because we've had a lot more opportunity to use different types of technology. So I think we're more aware of things like Skype, Teams, maybe Google Classroom and things like that. It comes all under social media. So I can see a really useful answer in the chat. Someone has written down, beth wyt ti'n meddwl am YouTube? What do you think about YouTube? And someone has also said, wyt ti'n defnyddio? Do you use Twitter bob dydd? And if you'd noticed, they've used some of the statement in the answer, which is brilliant. So don't be afraid to recycle some of the words from the question. So they've said, wyt ti'n defnyddio? Then they've just said, Twitter bob dydd. And that's a really brilliant example. And remember, if it makes sense, if it's related to the question, then you can gain 1 mark there. Okay, if we move on to the second one, pa wefannau. Wefannau is a really useful phrase to learn websites. Y space WE is just the internet. So they might ask you, how do they contact people in the exam or something like that? So which websites do you use? So here is my example. Rydw i'n hoffi Snapchat, achos mae Snapchat yn hwyl. So that's the type of website or technology that I use. rydw i'n defnyddio Google Classroom, so that's a website that I do use. I know Snapchat is an app, but you can also have it on if you type it in on Google as well. So as long as you've said a website, it doesn't always have to be a Welsh website. I'm sure a lot of you use a lot of Welsh websites at home, but as long as the website makes sense, then you can use it, okay? And remember, the ticks here is 1 plus tick, so that means you need to write in a full sentence. It needs to be spelled correctly, and you also need to use a full sentence. So if you just said Google in your answer, they may give you a mark just for Google, but it needs to be a full sentence. If you're not using a full sentence, then you will lose marks. Okay, I can see someone has written in a very brilliant sentence. They've said, rydw i'n defnyddio YouTube and a dosbarth. So they've said, I use YouTube in the classroom. That's brilliant, Diane. Okay, so ysgrifennwch dy marchiau, write down your marks in the chat. Ardderchog, I can see some people have managed to get full marks. Ardderchog. But the main thing about this, you need to ask questions, or answer questions related to the theme. So you need to make sure you are using the theme in your answers instead of going off topic. You also need to be making sure when it asks to answer in a full sentence, and the question always needs to make sense. Okay, otherwise you're giving easy marks away to the examiner, and a lot of these strategies you can also use for the speaking assessment as well. Okay, and I've written one last one. Rydw i'n mynd ar YouTube. I go on YouTube. Okay, so you haven't always have to keep the same pattern. You can vary your patterns. There's no correct answer as long as it makes sense and is related to the topic. Okay, so at the end of every session, I do put a mind map or a revision page for you at home. So I would revise some of these key phrases at home. So dyla ni, dyla ti, dyla dyla hi, dyla Bill, dyla ni, dyla chi, and dyla nhw. So these are useful patterns to give advice. They're also useful for your extended writing. So you need to be changing your tenses for extended writing and for your speaking. You're not able to get a C+ unless you are changing your tenses. Here are key phrases that you could learn, which are directly from the exam board. So paid is don't, dyla chi, you should plural, gallech chi, you could, rhaidech chi, you must, dyla chi, you should, rhaidech chi, you must again. And remember, ti is singular and informal, so when you're talking to one person, dyla chi, you should, which is plural. And again, you need to be careful of these phrases in your extended writing. If it says dyla chi, you must, you have to include everything that the examiner is asking you in the question. If they say gallech chi, you could, then you have a bit more freedom. You can use, they do recommend you using the bullet points, but you can also bring in your own ideas as well. And here are some really useful key question words that you can use for the exam. So ble mai, pryd mai, beth wyt ti'n meddwl, fydd, faint mai, oes, wyt ti'n hoffi, beth ydy dy barn di am, oes syniad arall gyda ti. So remember, it's really important that you are using questions in your speaking to get communication marks, and also that the questions that you do ask in your speaking or reading and writing exams are relevant to the theme of the question. So does anyone have any questions? Remember, the next session will be Monday, the 6th of December at 4:15. A link will be posted in the chat, and you can also go to the main website. Make sure you're typing in Welsh second language, and also that the session is at 4:15 until 5. You can also watch the session back on the website, because there's a copy of all the recordings on there. So when it comes to maybe mock revisions in December or the exams in from April to May time, you can watch it back for revision. So remember, type in the chat if you have any questions. Okay, diolch yn fawr.
Okay, diolch yn fawr iawn, Miss Charles, for today's session. We hope everybody joining us today found that useful. Don't forget, you can go to the e-sgol website, to the Cálem Cymru section to review this lesson again and watch back any of the other recordings from any of the other sessions. And don't forget to join us again next week for the 4th part and the final one of this session for this season. Diolch yn fawr iawn, pawb. Thank you.